And thank you for your patience as we get our microphone sound in a place where we can all hear this without it hurting our ears. Good morning, my name is Cecilia Taylor. I am honored and grateful to be here to introduce you and to welcome you to the Karl Clark Park in the Belle Haven neighborhood in the city of Menlo Park. Today marks the 165th Juneteenth in our country. And today, I want to introduce you to our esteemed mayor, a friend of mine, and also someone I consider a brother, Mayor Drew Combs.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's an honor for me to be able to commemorate the life of Karl E. Clark with the dedication of this storyboard, and also to be able to celebrate Juneteenth, which is now, as we all know, a federal holiday. In many respects, I think that honoring and commemorating Karl Clark's life and celebrating Juneteenth complement each other. Because as we all know, Juneteenth is a celebration, obviously a celebration of the dawning of freedom for those who have lived for decades in enslavement. But also it's a commemoration. It's a commemoration for all of those who never saw that freedom, for all of those who chose death over bondage, for all of those who never made it through the Middle Passage, for all of those who spent the entirety of their lives in enslavement. And so those ancestors are honored. Those ancestors are commemorated in the celebration of Juneteenth. Their sorrows, their disappointments, their struggles, their pain, but also their perseverance, also their steadfastness, also they're willing to not succumb to the environment and the indignity that was being visited upon them. I'd like to think in many respects that Karl Clark is a modern day local ancestor for all of us, for this community. He's a person that, even as he faced enormous amounts of racism and discrimination, always saw the good in people, always saw that there would be a brighter day, always saw that there was something important in investing in this community, in its children, and its people. Some years ago, I had the honor of, while I was canvassing, to meet him and to be invited into his home and spend some time talking to him and learning about the history of Menlo Park, learning about the history of his family. And I, as someone who's a transplant here, just considered it an enormous honor. And so for me, I am like in awe that not only did I get to, some time ago come to this park and see it renamed in his honor, but now that I get to return as mayor and see a coda and that legacy established, and that we're dedicating a storyboard for future generations to learn in detail about his life. Again, the struggles that he faced, but the triumph. And so for that, it is really an honor for me to be able to be here today and to kick off this ceremony. I want to, in closing, thank everyone who's been involved in this. They say it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, if you ever try to get something done in City Hall, it takes more than a village. And so I know that Councilmember Taylor has spearheaded this effort, and my hat's off to her for all of her efforts, to Belle Haven Action, to Anyoka, to Julie, the Parks and Rec Department of the city and Public Works. I thank you all for all that you've done to commemorate and help with this celebration today. With that, thank you and happy Juneteenth.
Thank you, Mayor Combs, for those inspiring, uplifting, and heartfelt words. Originally, Congresswoman Eshoo was scheduled to speak. She is unable to be here, and I will be reading a letter. Dear friends, I am so sorry I can't be with you in person today. Only official business in Washington prevents me from doing so. Thank you to my wonderful friend, Councilwoman Taylor, for inviting me to speak today as we dedicate the Karl E. Clark Storyboard unveiling at the Karl Clark Park in Menlo Park. How appropriate it is that this ceremony takes place as we observe Juneteenth, the oldest celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. I also thank Belle Haven Action, the Menlo Park Historical Association, and the City of Menlo Park for sponsoring today's celebration. Today is not only the observance of Juneteenth, it's a celebration of our newest national holiday. This week, I was so proud to cast my vote in Congress to make Juneteenth an official national holiday. I think Karl Clark would be thrilled about this and honored I think Karl Clark would be thrilled about this and honored that this park, which bears his name, with the addition of his storyboard. One of the greatest honors of my life as a member of Congress was my work to see that Mr. Clark was finally recognized as a hero by the United States Navy. I will never forget standing on stage at Moffett Field on January 17, 2012, with Mr. Clark and the U.S. Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, who awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat Number 5 to Mr. Clark after 66 years of denial of his heroic actions when he served aboard USS Aaron Ward on May 3rd, 1945. This was the Battle of Okinawa. As Secretary Mabus said that day, quote, simply put, Karl Clark was and is a hero. Thank you for honoring Mr. Clark today and for your dedication to educating generations to come about the important lessons of his life. When I walk the park, the magnificent spirit of this heroic and humble man will always accompany me. May God bless each and every one of you. Gratefully, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. At this time, our next speaker is Father Lawrence Goodie of St. Francis of Assisi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I got a little bit nervous when I looked around and didn't see anybody that I recognized. Oh, there we are. I was told that we were going to be on the program, and the people who were getting us on the program, I figured for sure they would be here. Thank you for coming and for helping us to celebrate this wonderful man who is a member of our church. And I wanted, it's not just Juneteenth, it's also Father's Day weekend. I want to congratulate those of you who are fathers who we're celebrating also on this weekend. Um, it was a great privilege to have known Mr. Clark. Excuse me, that's how we called him always, Mr. Clark. And I'll never forget the conversations we had at his home in Hollyburn. Can't tell you how much I admired him, apart from what he did, even more for who he was. What he did is the reason why we are here, but it gives us an opportunity to share who he was to those who didn't know him. Just to back up a little bit, Juneteenth, the day of liberation, freedom from slavery, not much different than the Israelites' celebration of Passover and freedom from slavery under the Egyptians. Did you ever wonder why it took so long for them to get to the Promised Land? Not even the great Moses got there. It took a whole generation, 40 years. And many times the chosen people longed to go back for Moses. Mr. Clark told me of his arrival in Hollyburn. He said he was just getting out of his car, and he was taking things out of his car, taking them into his house. He saw a group of young people across the street, and he wanted to get them to help him move his stuff into his house. You can imagine their reaction. He was the first African American, I think, in that neighborhood. They were not delighted to think that maybe their property values were going to go down. And so finally he went over to the group that was standing there looking at him, and he said, "I just got back from fighting a war. I didn't think I'd have to fight another war over here." Those are the words he used. Juneteenth was a long way from the Promised Land. On the ship which Mr. Clark saved, African Americans were the servants of the white officers. But when there was an emergency, amazing, all were created equal. With a separated shoulder, he manned the hose and kept the water on the bombs on the ship to prevent the fire from getting to the bombs, which would have destroyed the ship and everybody on it. And his commanding officer told him afterwards that he saved the ship. He did, all by himself. He saved the ship with a separated shoulder, and those fire hoses are not easy to hit with two hands, but with one hand he was able to hold to keep the fire from spreading. And after the ship got back and safe and sound, this officer, the commanding officer, had an attack of amnesia. And the United States of America had an attack of amnesia for 66 years. And but finally he got recognition and an award from the Navy, a park named for him. Wonderful. And we might say we're getting there. We're almost there at the Promised Land. We have ways to go, but we're on our way to the Promised Land. And we can celebrate now the Juneteenth in a very concrete way. Mr. Clark, war hero, public servant, member of our church, member of the Knights and Ladies of Peter Claver, and I see all the things that he did I didn't even know. And a wonderful man who lived down the street on Hollyburn.
Thank you so much, Father Goodie, for those beautiful words. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the elected officials here who are present. From the Menlo Park City Council, Vice Mayor Nash, Councilmember Ray Mueller, and Councilmember Jen Willison. Other elected officials present, and I'm honored to say that they are Menlo Park residents. Senator Josh Becker, Assemblymember Mark Berman, and if there is any other elected official here, please raise your hand so I can acknowledge you. We have, oh, yes, we have a council member here from Burlingame. I really appreciate you being here. It is an honor to serve as an elected official, and the work that goes along to it is definitely needed to be recognized in this moment. Also here from the city of Menlo Park, we have our city manager, Starla Jerome Robinson. We have our new police chief, Chief Norris. Please get to know them. They can answer your questions better than your elected officials sometimes. So you can use this time wisely as we transition into our next speaker. From the Menlo Park Historical Association, the president, Tim Johnston.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. It is an honor to be here and representing the Menlo Park Historical Association. I couldn't help but notice on the flyer the Belle Haven Action Committee's motto and tagline. And I think it's very important for us as the community of Menlo Park to be inclusive, to collaborate, and to recognize the diversity of the communities in which we live. And being a third generation Menlo Park resident, I think sometimes we fail to realize that. And I can assure you that the mission of the Menlo Park Historical Association going forward and always will be to recognize and be inclusive of all the different and diverse communities in which constitutes this town. And we're very pleased to be here today. I thank Pam for her efforts, to Pam Jones for her efforts. Having worked on the Menlo Gates storyboard, I can attest that as an earlier speaker said, sometimes it's not easy getting things through Menlo Park, and she's demonstrated a tremendous amount of patience and diligence in getting this done. So thank you very much. We are very pleased that the library's going to be opening soon, and we invite all of you to drop in and see us at the Historical Association. So thank you again.
Thank you to the Menlo Park Historical Association for all of your efforts in this project. I know that it would not be fair to not acknowledge Mr. Jim Lewis. Mr. Jim Lewis helps keep us accountable and on task. And I appreciate it, because a lot of the work that happened behind the scenes to get us where we are today, you don't see. Many emails and phone calls, and just making sure that we stayed on a timeline. Thank you. Next, our featured speaker is actually going to be someone that I had the pleasure of being a part of an educator's team many years ago at Beechwood School. Miss Konstance Kirkendoll is a teacher at Beechwood and also a former student of mine when I was working as a teacher's aide at Beechwood several decades ago. Initially, we were going to have someone from our youth, community youth, speak. We did not have enough time to prepare that, and so Ms. Konstance Kirkendoll will be reading from Mr. Clark's book. If you were not aware, Mr. Clark was also an author. He had 4 books. We have not been able to find all 4, but we definitely know that he did publish 4 books. Ms. Konstance Kirkendoll, it's a pleasure to have you come and read from Pieces of My Mind.
Good morning. It's so good to see all of you. So, I apologize for that. This reading is simply going to be the first part of his book, Pieces of My Mind. It's just some reflections that he has, and here goes. I write this book. See, this is great because it takes a little bit of the anxiety and nervousness out. So here we go. I'm gonna stay right here, in the pocket, right here. I write this book fully aware that each of us is unique. Our lives and life experiences are all different. I thank God for my destiny, my fate, or whatever you wish to call the guiding light that has allowed me to live a full, adventurous, and healthy life for over 80 years. I was born in the horse and buggy days when the horse was a necessity and wagons were the main mode of transportation. It is easy for me to recollect the time when there was no radio, certainly no television. The few automobiles and airplanes were a novelty. The country was filled with race hatred. People of color were being lynched so often it was hardly noticed. Prohibition was in place and the paying public got its alcohol through bootleggers, while poor people of all colors made bathtub gin. The Great Depression came and people began dying on the streets from hunger and from cold. The hoochie coochie houses were flourished. Jazz and rent parties were commonplace, all just part of the scene. People of color could only get the jobs no white person wanted, such as maid, janitor, ditch digger, dishwasher, Pullman porter, and the like. My father and mother moved our family out of Denver to a small farm they had purchased. Our farm was a short distance from a great prairie where wild horses, rattlesnakes, and prairie dogs still live. I had the good fortune of seeing all those things. Dad and Mom wanted the siblings to grow up in a healthier environment. Dad also knew that out there on his piece of ground, he could demand respect and demand he be addressed as Mr. Clark instead of boy. Later, I joined the U.S. Navy as a mess attendant. That was the only job people of color could hold in the Navy in the 1930s. I was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Dory Miller, a Navy mess attendant on the USS West Virginia during the Pearl Harbor attack, was awarded the Navy Cross for his heroism. He was my friend. I fought on combat ships in the South Pacific during World War II and have lived to tell this story concerning the Black Navy mess attendants and stewards. I will tell the story as well as I can, knowing the public rarely ever hears the truth about what we Black men did on those ships. I consider myself very fortunate to have seen most of the world, and I endeavor to bring my experiences to you. I only wish to tell my story truthfully in my own words. So that was his introduction, and I encourage all of you to pick up a piece to figure out more or to read more about him, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkendoll. I really appreciate you reading the excerpt from his book. Mr. Clark spoke and wrote from the heart, and there is an effort to produce the Karl Clark play. We were hoping to have an update for you today. That will be coming soon. I also wanted to take this time to acknowledge that we have representatives from different offices here. First, we did have another elected representative attend, and that is Ms. Shawnee Stevenson. She is the newest and the first district representative for the Sequoia Union High School District. We also have representatives from our congressional offices, Mr. Brian Perkins from Congresswoman Spears' office. And we do have a representative from Anna Eshu's office, and I do not see him. So, oh, you are still here. It is important to recognize the people behind the scenes that do the work, and we appreciate, of course, our elected representatives. From the City of Menlo Park, I'd like to acknowledge Brian Perkins. Not sure if he's here. From our Public Works Department, also Shine Reinhardt. From Library and Community Services, and also Gary. Gary was here yesterday morning, and we had an opportunity to actually get a sneak peek of the storyboard. And I have to say that it was hard for me not to get emotional. My experiences with the Mr. Clark came from the stories from my father. My father grew up in Hollyburn, the 1200 block across the street from him. My grandfather was one of the many black families that were only given the option to purchase homes here in the Belle Haven community. For me, knowing the history of my family is why it is important to acknowledge the history of how we got here, whether it was through pain or beauty. But something that I believe is important is to take that pain and make it into beauty. Because if I carry the pain of what my ancestors endured, I wouldn't be standing before you. It is easy to hate. It is easy to be angry. It is more challenging to love, to learn to love someone who is intentionally hurting you. It takes courage, it takes strength, and I know you know it takes believing in God. But most importantly, for me, I see that as being what defines my freedom as a person. As we celebrate Juneteenth, it's about freedom. How do you see freedom? How do you feel freedom? How have you experienced freedom? And it hurts to even ask this, or how haven't you experienced freedom? Because there are those who live under the thumb of discriminatory practices. There are those who live under the thumb of racism. There are those who live within the hearts of structural and systemic racism because it still lives. How can we take this day of freedom and change that? That is how I choose to live. Because I still hear the painful stories of my father of what it felt like to live here in 1965. I still feel the pain of my grandfather who is no longer here when I walk past his house on Hollywood. I still hear the pain in the voice of Mr. Clark on the day that I met him in September of 2016 when I chose to run for office the first time. It was important for me to let him know why I knew of him. My words were, I am Olin Walker's granddaughter and Moses Walker's daughter. And it is my humble gratitude to meet you today and to ask for you to vote for me, because I am running for this community. I am running off of the strength of my ancestors and off the strength of my parents who are still with us. I know that for me to feel free, I need to be active. I need to be honest, and I need to be present. And today, on this Juneteenth, 165 years after we were given emancipation, we still need to fight for freedom. We still need to talk about what it feels like. And we still need to be active. This community I refer to as the Treasure Triangle. Why? Because people like Mr. Clark walked this earth. People like my grandfather walked this earth. People like Louise Stamper walked this earth. Louise Stamper was here for the park dedication in 2018. She is now our ancestor. Naomi Campbell is our ancestor. Mr. Pryor is our ancestor. Mr. Ali is our ancestor. Those ancestors lived and died under a system that didn't want them. But they also lived in a community that did. They lived in a place that treasured what they felt and what they did. The day at Mr. Clark's funeral, when I had the idea about naming this park, it was because I knew he needed to be honored. His blood, sweat, and tears, and most importantly, love, helped shape that treasure triangle that I so much appreciate and I serve now on the Menlo Park City Council. Belle Haven Action grew out of me losing my race in 2016. I know it was what was supposed to happen. Belle Haven Action is led by 3 women: Anyoko Perez, Julie Shanson, and Cecilia Taylor. It is not by chance that we create a triangle. The 3 of us create a triangle to help protect and serve the treasure triangle known as the Belle Haven neighborhood. I am so grateful that you all came out today. As we try to heal from a pandemic, our community was hit pretty hard by the pandemic. And now we need to figure out, how do we heal from it? What are the next steps? And Belle Haven Action will continue to be here for those next steps. Advocacy, inclusion, and collaboration. We make sure you are included. We make sure that there is a space for you. And we make sure that even if you are just one voice, that your voice is acknowledged. You do not have to be 52% of a population to be acknowledged. You can be just one. One person is very impactful. And I just want you all to know that we will continue our advocacy, our inclusive practices, and our collaboration for the duration of while we are here. And we are very hopeful that our Monties, our Berts, our Lamishas will have a legacy to lead when they choose it is their time. The legacy of Mr. Clark is here. The legacy of Olin Walker is here. The legacy of our community is here. And I welcome you to see the storyboard that will reflect the beauty of our community forever. Thank you so much for being here. Do we just pull the veil off? I don't know how to do this.
Why don't we have the folks who are here for the unveiling, the dignitaries, family members, etc., gather around, and we'll do an official unveiling and photo.
WWII, Mr. Clark. Clark is Carl with a K. Born Carl with a K. Mr. Clark serves in the Navy for 22 years, achieving the level of Chief Petty Officer in 1954, and brings his soul to the dear black men at that time. And so the storyboard is in English and in Spanish. It talks about Mr. Clark's life in 1955. It talks about his time as a leader. There are pictures of his family here. And I think this is probably Congressman Escher will appreciate the photo from him being honored with his medals. I want to thank Menlo Park, the City of Menlo Park, Public Works Department. This is phenomenal to have this here in our community. It is beautiful, it is heartwarming, and it is definitely appreciated. So please take the time to look at it and to read it. Thank you.
Folks, thank you so much for coming out. Sorry to startle you there. The Boys and Girls Club across the street is open for those of you who would like to visit the restroom. They're open until about 11:30. Just go up the street there until the last part of the building gets open for that. Thank you.
This is what I missed during the pandemic. When some experience.
And there's probably like that's stuff that come out to too, right? But yeah, that's cool.
Last couple of years. Hopefully they'll start like a week, 2 weeks long thing.
Right, you're both that right? Yeah, that's cool. Really? I'm not a water main. It's confusing. I'll be right back. Okay.